Hey, so from the question on why I did EPP, at the end of the day, I think we're all looking for solutions. We're all looking for answers. But it's very, very important to identify the problems. And that sounds like a really rudimentary and reductionist issue, but I think, unless you evaluate someone really, really keenly and then bounce the data off of however you accumulate it. Evaluation doesn't have to just be a physical therapist doing a physical exam. When you're acquiring data from any method, internal load, external load, testing in terms of maximal performance, vision, et cetera, you're going to bounce that data off of the norms of physiology, but also the norms of that group. And when you do that, you start to find a gap analysis. It's just business. And in any business, when somebody takes over a company or a consulting comes in, they'll perform a gap analysis. So when you have that gap analysis and you start asking these questions, then you find the solutions. And the issues that we found, I want to think, gosh, I'd have to figure out the year, but the first time this type of training became something very important for me to learn more about was there's some hallmark moments. And I think the first one was I spent several days at University of Minnesota with Cal Dietz. Eric Klein was the strength and conditioning coach for Minnesota football at that time. I remember we did some work with Big Dave Osland, who I think was still, really at his first peak. If you don't follow Dave, one of the top strongmen in America at that time, kind of dealt with some things and went away, and then I think he's returned a few years ago to be really top of the food chain once again. That being said, during that time at University of Minnesota, Cal introduced me to Ben Peterson. So, and they showed me, I forget what they called this program, but basically it was what they would call a conditioning program using weights. And it was looking at manipulating different parts of some kind of curve where when we draw other things and we say from this line to the left would be something that would be low threshold, or somewhere where when energy production is not entirely costly, but in exchange for that you're not going to get that top end. And the different protocols that Ben and Cal were showing me, it was just really a landmark. It was one of these moments that we all have where it's like, oh my God, like this is how smart I'm not, but more importantly, this is the chase. And the question that I was excited to answer with that information is very simple. How can we have as efficient and economically favorable training for everyone, specifically individuals that are going through very, very precise motor training, aka at that point in my time, basketball. How do we train as aggressively as possible? How do we get the best return on our training dollar? And how do we not screw up technical training? And that was the first time this type of thing, this type of training, and it became a chase of mine. Because I kept saying to myself, there's got to be a way that we can complement some of the things that will prelude the changes in the body before they become apparent. Meaning, if your shoulder's stiff, there was a day that it wasn't stiff, but it was stiffening. Before your knee hurt, there was a day that it didn't hurt, but it was on its way to approaching those thresholds. And when you have some simple thoughts, the use of oxygen would probably make things lower threshold and make those costs, if anything, less accelerated, meaning your knee won't hurt as soon or your shoulder doesn't get stiff as soon if we're using oxygen as part of our energy production. So many years went by, and obviously, as I have described many, many times, I'll do it again here. As part of our relationship with Omega Wave in Canada Basketball, we would, among others, it wasn't just Canada Basketball, we would spend time, at the time Omega Wave headquarters was in Finland. And one day I'm driving in with Val because I stayed at his house, and I said, Val always called Omega Wave a solution. And I said, Val, if you had a solution, you had to already identify the problem. What was the problem that you were identifying? And he said the problem was, I want to know if my training is doing what it's supposed to be doing. Now, there's a leap there, as we can talk until for days about, on if the data of Omega Wave actually elucidates that. Well, that's where it comes to beliefs, and I believe that it has a handle. Okay, if somebody requires more layers of evidence to apply a particular strategy, you win. It's fine. Listen, I have enough to feel good about using Omega Wave to determine if the adaptations that what I think are happening from training are actually happening. And we'll look at those electrical signatures of the different body systems that Omega Wave can test, measure, and elucidate. I said, Val, this is about learning this technology. It's about learning the methodology to create these markers as favorable as possible for performance. So if I understand how you train people, because how you were training created a question, a problem, and that question again was, is your training doing what you think it's doing? And then you would change the training based on potentially what Omega Wave would tell you. I need to be able to look behind the eyes of your training, and I'll understand better what Omega Wave is trying to tell us. So probably for another 3-4 days in Finland, Val would teach us some of the methods, and it has been shared. There's Omega Wave website has some things. There was a seminar that Val and Roman did at Rand Phones, where it's just another mind-blowing experience in terms of putting pieces together into, in this case, if Omega Wave electrical signatures were trending a particular way, we would see less injuries, which is money, okay? And if that's not so, again, people can call bullshit all they want. This is, it's okay to have different thresholds of what you accept and what you don't. But moving forward, when I've said before, like, answers to a lot of questions, they live maybe outside profession. I think biophysicists or people that are making rockets for SpaceX have answers for us in physical performance. They don't know why they're the answers. They're not even the answers to the questions that we have, but they'll say something, and they don't even, it's not like they're keeping a secret, but they don't even know why you care or why you want to know what they're saying, because they said something that just, wait a minute, what? Wait, say that again? And then all of a sudden you have an answer. So that's what happened for me in 2 different courses, and we talk about this in EPP, where we, after you understood some of the values of what hypoxia and acidosis can do to the human systems in terms of movement and training and continued training, if you're under recovered from hypoxia and acidosis, meaning you are using high threshold strategies or other life processes are trending that way. Remember, you can be I like under recovered rather than overtrained, because under recovered makes it a little bit more conventional thought to include a lot of things that are not training related. If you don't sleep well, you're under recovered. If you don't eat well, you're under recovered. If your psychology is very, very poor, you're really wired, really, really tight, I don't know, like me, or other types of social consequences, you're under recovered for whatever your next subsequent event is, and then what are your beliefs on what you think will happen next. So in 2 different seminars, both of which were from manual therapy, which they had no connection to training. In fact, I think in fascial manipulation there's actually a reticence to training depending on who the instructor is. But what they, in both of those seminars, we'll talk more during the EPP videos, but basically both a trigger point model from the West and centers of fusion, centers of coordination, centers of perception that you see in the fascial manipulation model, they both yielded repeatable and scientific methods that indicated that the points that they believed had a significant impact on how people moved or how they perceived noxious threats were areas of tissue that were significantly more acidotic than other local tissues, even surrounding the area. Because if you push here and it's a big ow, but over here it's not so much, they would measure. And they did this very independently, very above board, which is why fascial manipulation is actually very, very well respected in terms of its messages. But here's the thing. They were just showing us that these points are different than other areas, and this is why you should treat them to get this desired effect, whether it was a trigger point where you push on the infraspinatus and the front of your shoulder pain goes away, or something far more full body and far more, I guess, holistic, not a word I use a lot. But I'm like, if the tissue that we treat makes us better, that means the tissue is what's causing, or at least a significant contributor to our problem. And those tissues are represented with acidosis. Well, what if we trained in a way to minimize or at least improve our buffering of acid and those environments? And that's exactly what anti-glycolytic training is attempting to do. So that's where EPP fits, because another question in the stories I just did was about, like, what's training equals rehab? EPP is training equals rehab from the training piece. It's before the adaptations come into play. And how do you further reverse those adaptations when you combine this type of aggressive training, but completely warranted and completely intelligent and scientific, with other methods that we talk about in T equals R1 and 2, a little bit in 3, that try to bring you out of the hole in certain segments. Because when we use a movement evaluation and looking at joints can get in the right positions to absorb adaptive stress, we're going to find that some joints and joint systems do require a different layer of adaptation, meaning they cannot handle high levels of training. And from there, with years of applying these models to as many different people as possible, I'm running my own research. I've got every single thing documented, and because that's what Aaron Kutz said I was supposed to do if I'm going to be a heuristic. We started to apply the different protocols that are going to be in EPP for different sports. And obviously, when you're training general population with this model, it's like CrossFit. The problem in training with CrossFit is if you don't know what the events are, it falls a little short. But if you told me what the events are, I would love to do this for free for people that are like legitimate CrossFit, not recreational nonsense where there's absolutely no reason for you to be training in this asinine way. You tell me what the events are, you do EPP, and I almost guarantee you will dominate whatever your PR is. I don't know if you beat somebody else, because they just might be better than you. It's just like powerlifting. Somebody's always going to be better. But you just train general population like a sprinter, and if you don't want to, tell me how you want to look, and we can adjust the EPP from the different protocols. But it really then answers so many questions. It answers this philosophical question of linking training equals rehab by these values of how tissue adapts to excessive or under-recovered hypoxia and acidosis. It answers questions on how you can maintain high levels of technical efficiency, practice. We talk about the game, we talk about practice, while you can still train and improve qualities, macro qualities of all individuals. There's not an individual on earth that performs physical activity that is not going to benefit from a highly efficient hormonal profile, a highly efficient immune system, a heart that is specific to the activities that they do, and ideal, efficient, maximal oxidative function of all type 1 and type 2 fibers. And this is what I learned from Val Nasetikin. From a programming standpoint, Pavel Sassolin showed me some of these ideas many years ago, sitting at Pete's Coffee in Santa Monica, and that's it's always, I'm probably never going to talk about EPP without crediting those two individuals. But again, why EPP? Because it solves problems. You have an incredibly efficient way to train. It is an ass-kicking way of training. It applies very useful and significant scientific methods, but it allows you to train the body parts that warrant that while you use other methods to bring up limbs or a spine that can't tolerate those things yet. So you do have to have keen exercise selection, which might take you away from the exercises that are most applicable to your sport. That's where lateralizations and regressions come into play. It's just how I think. So I can never answer a question without answering a whole bunch of other questions. But I do hope that EPP, among other things, really anything that I do, it should make things as simple as possible, but no simpler, which is an Einstein quote. I think sometimes people look at making things simpler by simply eliminating variables or choices. I don't agree with that. I think making things simple as possible by categorizing or compartmentalizing every possible choice so that you have this choose your own adventure, which then allows you to understand things at a very keen level and then ultimately make it your own. Because if we can all agree on what we're trying to accomplish, the methods then become incredibly expansive, and you have a report card, and you have a model that you can bounce whatever it is that you're doing. And if what you do is different than what I might do, you win. But we'll keep it within these right-left barriers, and that's what EPP sets from a training model. And it actually helps us understand how to turbocharge maybe some other types of protocols just by not using the entire 7-day repeating microcycle, similar than what you would see in Westside. From you just starting your training week over, 3-week waves there. But this is just series of single weeks. It solves anyone can do it. You can stop and start whenever you want. Maybe you probably won't see results in 1 or 2 weeks, but you shouldn't expect to see results in 1 or 2 weeks of anything. So I think that why, again, the question is why EPP? Well, we solve problems, we improve whatever the bottom line is, and I gave you some of the hallmarks that kind of got me to this thought process. I hope that makes sense. And if you're ever in the Mobile section, the Crichton section of Mobile, Alabama, and you do happen to shine a light up in a tree and it doesn't disappear, anybody seen a leprechaun? Say yeah.